2 months ago, Razer blatantly copied the trademark feature of the Wooting keyboard called Rapid Trigger, and Razer's execution, it was good, but they were claiming to be as responsive as Wooting, and they simply were not. Today though, we have another contender, and that is SteelSeries. They are also calling it Rapid Trigger, and today we're going to see just how good it is. Now, super quick briefing on this Rapid Trigger feature. I've talked about it a lot before, but what this does is it resets the key switch the moment you lift off, rather than having to wait for the switch to pass through an actuation point, which is what a normal keyboard does. The difference is now a much more responsive and intuitive feeling input, and arguably the best innovation when it comes to modern gaming keyboards. You can counter-strafe a lot snappier in games like Valorant and CS, and movement in other FPS games is just a lot nicer, more responsive. You no longer feel like you're overlapping inputs. Rapid Trigger on the Razer versus the Wooting though is quite different. On the Wooting you have the entire keystroke range where it can be detected. It's also a sensitivity of 0.1 millimeters, which feels pretty much instant. On the Razer though, you only have a detectable range between 1.5 and 3.6 millimeters, and the sensitivity just doesn't feel as responsive. But what about SteelSeries? Well, I went out and bought the Apex Pro Mini, plugged it in, and loaded up the new firmware. Supposedly every Apex Pro keyboard, which has their analog Omni Point 2.0 switches, will get this Rapid Trigger update. So yeah, nice little free performance buff, exactly what we saw with Razer. I will admit though, with just how densely cluttered SteelSeries software is with pointless features that no one will ever use, it did take me a couple of minutes to work out how to even enable this Rapid Trigger feature. But basically, you just highlight all the switches that you want and tick this little box with the lightning bolt icon. Then you click save and it's enabled. I ended up getting a weird bug after I did this, but after a reset, looks like it's working. So then I hopped into a game and started testing this out versus the Wooting 60, and I can honestly say that I couldn't feel a difference. Rapid Trigger on the SteelSeries Apex Pro Mini legitimately feels as sensitive and responsive as the Wooting 60 HE. It has that same microscopically sensitive feel. As soon as you start lifting off, it resets the switch. Now on the Razer Huntsman Mini, Razer seemed to have tightened things up a bit since I tested it, but there's still that 0.5 millimeter or so dead zone at the bottom. So as you can see here, I am actually slightly lifting and repressing the switch, but the switch never resets. On the Wooting and SteelSeries, however, we do see that instant stop and start motion the moment the switch starts moving. So yeah, SteelSeries, honestly pretty impressed. Now to take a closer look at what's happening here, I built this little keyboard tester right here. It's super basic. It's just a solenoid powered by an Arduino, so that is pressing the switch. I think RTings and LTT use something similar, but yeah, this way we can mechanically press and release a switch. The real secret sauce though is this. It's a super slow motion camera recording things at 3000 frames per second. This way we can see the time delay between mechanically pressing a switch and what's happening on the screen behind it. So in the case of testing Rapid Trigger, the solenoid lifts off the switch, and then we count the number of frames until we see the unscope animation on screen, and that gives us our latency. For the Wooting, we have 35 frames. SteelSeries is a fraction slower than that at 42 frames, but the Razer is noticeably slower than both, 75 for the Huntsman Mini. I ended up running this test 30 times for each keyboard. These latency values as well do include the PC and monitor latency, which do vary run to run quite a lot, but these numbers here are pretty much spot on to the overall averages after 30 runs. So yeah, the biggest difference here is that the Huntsman Mini is a limited Rapid Trigger implementation compared to the SteelSeries and the Wooting, because it has that dead zone at the bottom. That 0.5 millimeter or so evidently does make a difference in actual latency, and you can feel it too. It's one of the limitations, I guess, of being an optical switch versus a Hall effect magnetic switch like in the Wooting and the SteelSeries. It is though still significantly better than having Rapid Trigger disabled though. I mean, just take a look at this. There is a massive difference. This is definitely something that is worthwhile enabling on the Razer Huntsman. I did test the press latency as well, so seeing how fast every single keyboard here could respond to a press input. I set all actuation points to 1.5 millimeters just to keep things even here, and yeah, there was not a huge difference. Now don't read too deep into the numbers here, because again, it does include PC latency and monitor latency too, which does swing things quite a bit, but it is at least a nice sanity check to see that yeah, neither of these keyboards are hugely faster or slower than the others. So the SteelSeries Rapid Trigger performance here, honestly really impressed. I mean, performance-wise in-game, it actually feels pretty, spot on to the Wooting 60, but there are still some pretty big differences. One of the main ones being that you can't actually change the rapid trigger sensitivity like you can on the Wooting. On the SteelSeries, it's just on or off. And on the Wooting, I don't actually mind loosening it up a bit for a couple of those keys. Your interact key, for example, where you might want to press and hold a revive. If rapid trigger kicks in because it's so sensitive and you end up canceling a revive, that's not exactly ideal. I also couldn't get the multiple key actuations working on the SteelSeries or the Razer, but on the Wooting, it worked first try. So not really sure what's happening there. Availability though is a pretty big one. Within the SteelSeries range, you've got a few different keyboards. In the Razer's range, you've got a few different models as well, and you can go and pick these keyboards up at your local game store like 10 minutes away. That is pretty much what I did. The Wooting, on the other hand, is online only, and it's about a 2 to 3 week wait at the moment. However, that 2 to 3 week wait is definitely worth it, if only to never have to install the Razer or SteelSeries software on your computer. SteelSeries GG, or whatever it's called, it is literally the worst peripheral software that I've ever used. Like, can someone tell me why this thing has an aim trainer built in, and why there are pages with product ads and blog posts, and also why it takes up half a gig of RAM. Also, if you're wondering why there are 2 SteelSeries keyboards in this video, by the way, the first one broke when I enabled rapid trigger. It started freaking out and spamming keys. I got some quick testing done, but eventually it got to the point where I couldn't even plug it in, and I had to buy another one. Luckily, I seem to be the only one who has had this problem, but I do think it's worth mentioning. Razer's software too is pretty atrocious, and by the way, actually needs to be opened in the background for their rapid trigger just to work. Wooting software, on the other hand, is a super clear, super fast web page. It only has like 3 different pages with the stuff you need, and that's it. Also, as far as I can see, you can't do tappable arrow keys on the Razer Huntsman Mini or the SteelSeries Apex Pro Mini, but you can do that easily on the Wooting 60. This is something that I use every single day, just for desktop use and editing. Personally, I feel like it's a pretty big difference. But yeah, those are the main differences, primarily in the rapid trigger functionality and the latency numbers as well. I'm mainly still going to be recommending the Wooting 60. I do think it is the superior keyboard overall. But man, it is definitely nice to see other companies legitimately catch up in terms of raw speed and also offer that as a free update.